Hello, welcome to the Philosophy of Sports, where we review hot takes and up-to-date information on everything NFL, NBA, MLB, and college football. I'm your host, Tom Gentile.
Bill Gentile.
Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and our YouTube channel, as it would be a big help in us maintaining our talk show. Again, thank you so much for supporting this channel. Now, let's get into today's episode, and it is an episode that we've been dreading for the past couple of months. The state of the Dallas Mavericks.
Your Dallas Mavericks.
I'm not even sure if they're my team anymore, to be completely honest. The Dallas Mavericks this season had quite possibly the worst season in franchise history, considering the expectations. Granted, last year they made the Western Conference Finals. They embarrassed one of the up-and-coming rising super teams in the NBA, and it almost sent them into a death spiral. It sent another proverbial super team in the Utah Jazz to a death spiral, and now we couldn't even qualify for the play-in tournament this year with arguably the best player in the NBA, arguably, and arguably also the best shot creator in the NBA in Kyrie Irving. And yet, because of a multitude of reasons that we will cover today, they could not get the job done even in the slightest.
Give me some stats.
Okay, some stats. All right. Well, speaking of not being able to get the job done, the Mavs, I read an article not too long ago that said the Mavs are currently 38-43 with one game remaining in the season, which they promptly lost to quite possibly the worst team in basketball in the San Antonio Spurs. Dallas would be 45-36 if they kept roughly their half of their 10-plus point leads entering the fourth quarter. Let's dive into what really went down. The Mavs had 16 losses where they entered the fourth quarter with anywhere between a 0 and a 5-point lead. They had 12 losses where they entered the fourth quarter with a 6 to 9 point lead. Now, I guess some of those are excusable. Anything can happen, that kind of thing. I mean, you can't lose all of those games. That's unacceptable, but losing some of those games is fine. Here's where it gets really absurd. They have 11 losses where they entered the fourth quarter with anywhere between a 10 and a 15-point lead. They had 2 losses where they entered the fourth quarter with a 16 to 20-point lead. I know. And it gets even worse. And then to cap it off, they had 2 losses when they entered the fourth quarter with above a 21-point lead. Now, here's something else. When you break it down further, this is another part of that article, the Mavs could be 42-38 if the team held on to the 4 16-point fourth quarter leads. And 42-38, guess what? Would be the 6th seed in the Western Conference. We would be right back to where we were last year. Maybe a little bit of regression, a lot more fraudulence, but we wouldn't be doing this talk show in the degree that we're doing it right now.
Correct.
So that is, I mean, it's terrible coaching. It's terrible effort. It's terrible everything. And I'm going to give it to you. Just go off on them.
Okay. I think the problem starts at the top, but not exclusively. I feel like Nico Harrison didn't bring in any real talent. They were gifted Kyrie Irving because he demanded out, and that he had nothing to do with that, with him coming here. They simply shopped him and said, who's going to bite and who's going to give us the best package? And they got a pretty good package in return for him. Nico Harrison hadn't done anything since he's been here. So he was supposed to be the Nike guy. He had contact with everybody, but nobody showed. And I don't know where that's going. second person on the list has got to be Jason Kidd. He pushed all the right buttons last year, and I feel like we overachieved. Like we probably shouldn't have gone as far as we did. This year, he pushed none of the right buttons at any point in time. He substituted indiscriminately, it felt like, on the games that I watched. I feel like just coaching alone was bad enough. It probably cost us 4 or 5 games with not making the right substitutions and having the right rotations in there. I felt like there were times when you needed to just have defense out there and you had all offense and vice versa. And it just didn't work out. So a lot of it falls on his shoulders. But the person I'm really here to talk about is, like you said, arguably the best player in the game, Luka Doncic. He filled up the stat sheet, and he did so in such a whiny way. I feel like as far as a leader of the team, I'm not sure whether he has that in him anymore. I mean, he literally looks at the ref after every single play on offense and defense and throws his hands up like, why didn't you call that? And I feel like as a leader, you have to lead. You have to have the eye of the tiger. You got to be the dog. You just take it and you keep going. I'm talking about not the leaders today. I'm not talking about LeBron, because he does the exact same thing on every single play. But Luke is just as bad. That's all he does is whine. And if he plays 35 minutes, half of that is simply whining and looking at the refs, begging for calls, instead of just going down and playing. I feel like a lot of games were lost because he never got back on defense because he was whining about fouls, and vice versa. He whined about him on defensive positions, and he wouldn't get down there in time to create offense.
Which is his bread and butter ultimately.
I'm sorry?
Which is his bread and butter ultimately, is creating offense and orchestrating the court. Here's something else that I saw. This is intriguing to you about those Jason Kidd comments. You know how many minutes we got in the entire season of all the games that we played this season? You know how many minutes we got of this lineup right here? Luka Doncic, Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, JaVale McGee, and Christian Wood. You know how many minutes we got of that lineup all season?
I'm going to guess 0.00.
And you'd be correct. There is absolutely none of that lineup at any point during the season. The closest that we got was we didn't have Dinwiddie when we had THJ in there, which I guess isn't bad, but it still goes to show how awful the substitutions were for Jason Kidd. And I mean, really, there's no real one person to blame here. They were so awful with everything. It was tragic.
Yeah, it was a multi-factor, perfect storm, shit storm of a season where everything that could went wrong did. But I feel like they owned that. I mean, like I said, nothing was done to upgrade the personnel except for the Kyrie Irving. And honestly, whereas I feel like, we'll get into that later, I feel like Kyrie Irving now is great. They would have finished in the top half had they just kept the team they had. And they may not have went to the finals. Obviously, they would not have gone to the finals with that, but they're sure not going to the finals with this. But I don't know. It starts at the top with the top 3 guys. We need more talent surrounding. That's what everybody says. I feel like we need a better coach who has a handle on situational basketball. And like I say, I don't know that Luka Doncic, as great as he is, will ever turn into that leader. He's now got 5 years in the league, and he's continuously gotten worse. I remember as a rookie, he just sort of played, whined a little bit, and it's progressively gotten worse to where it's every single play. It's every single play. He makes the shot, he misses the shot, he's whining. He makes the play on defense, he misses the play on defense, he's whining. Somebody else gets fouled, he's whining. You know, if someone gets called for a foul, he's whining. He's just missing out. That's going to keep you. That's why he ended up, not in the top 5 of the MVP voting. He just. I mean, I think people are losing respect for him. I don't think people want to play with somebody like that. As great as he is, and as much as he can elevate someone else's game, he's not. He's whining. That's his main focus now.
It's just, I mean, this isn't even. It's not even a point where this is our usual song and dance either. I mean, we're not tired and going through the whole, run of the mill. I mean, it's just this season was so depressing because of all of these factors. I mean, we got baited. Another thing. I mean, we got baited. Jason Kidd comes in. He ran Brooklyn into the ground. He ran Milwaukee into the ground. So we hired him, and we thought, okay, he's probably going to end up running us into the ground. Why did we hire this man? And then he leads us to the Western Conference Finals. He was an amazing coach.
Pushed all the right buttons
that year. I mean, yeah, he just pushed all the right buttons. A little bit of luck, but I mean, Game 7 of the second round, that wasn't luck. It was utter domination. Okay, letting Jalen Brunson cook in the Utah series, that was utter domination. And that's another thing. We'll get to Jalen Brunson later. We'll get to him later. But this year, he pushed all of the wrong buttons, and he completely sabotaged anything that we had going for us. Just
yes, and seemingly obvious things like you need to stop, and Dwight Powell's out there, and you're just not going to get it. I mean,
how about this? How about this? How about when we're blowing some of these 20-point leads? How about a timeout? Like, you have these timeouts.
Well, he saves those till just when you go from up by 20 to down by 2. Then he calls for timeout when the damage is done and the game is now set and the momentum is shifted.
I mean, and
I feel like that's what happened. They would start to blow leads. The whining would grow louder. Everybody would join in on the whining. And then the next thing you know, you're losing.
I mean, he would go in. I mean, he would blow leads. He would watch as the Mavs blew leads. I mean, a lot like your typical NFL coach from last year, just saving those timeouts. I mean, need I remind you of some of these horrible game clock managements? And Jason Kidd just took that to heart. I mean, blowing these leads.
Stop the bleeding
and just watching, and then he has to go into these post-game preferences and say things. Well, like, hey, at least no one's dying. At least I can. At least the players still crack a smile every once in a while. Like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, terrible all the way around. Now going forward with the Mavs, to me, it doesn't look that great either. Let's go over some of the roster that they have.
Please enlighten me with the roster.
Okay, so I'm going to go in alphabetical order. Let's talk about what they contributed, whether we should keep them. Some of them are untradeable, and what they can give you in the future. So let's start with Davis Bertans.
Fill our audience members in with the money stat real quick.
The Ginger Giant didn't ask to be traded here with a quite possibly, honestly, the worst contract in the history of the NBA.
Honestly, I'm going to agree with you.
$16 million. He scored 201 points. That's $77,000 a point he made last year. Okay. But once again, it was part of the deal, and we accepted it to keep the money straight. Actually, I thought he's quite the sharpshooter. I was impressed. He plays no defense, which means he fits right in on the Mavs. Going forward, they're hamstrung with him again this year. But the final 2 years of his contract are worth $5 million and $4 million respectively. You would be able to cut them and eat the losses. But he's, I'm afraid, going to be back with us next year. But as a situational shooter, a catch and shoot for a 7-footer, he's actually pretty good at that. But that is it.
But I mean, we're paying him too much money for decent. We're paying him money like a starter.
We're paying him money like a superstar.
Yeah, superstar even.
Yeah, that was someone else's contract mistake that we took on to make a trade.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, Reggie Bullock. I thought Reggie Bullock do what Reggie Bullock do. He had a couple games where he couldn't miss. And overall, I think he's a serviceable player. I think he makes every squad in the NBA. And I also think he starts on maybe half of them. But if you're counting on him to be your starter and trying to win a championship, I don't think that's betting
because
money.
Within these games where he would, take on like a pretty good, Steph Curry impression all of a sudden, it would be surrounded by 10 or 12 games where he looked like an absolute moron out on the court.
Correct.
I mean, he would again go into the catch and shoot and he wouldn't do anything, and then occasionally he would go in and try to create something that wasn't there. I mean, it's too inconsistent. I don't know what you do with him.
He's an NBA player. I think he's on a fairly friendly contract. I mean, not someone who, if he's playing heavy minutes on your team, you're not going to the finals. And that's what we're talking about here. We want to get the team to the finals, and he's not going to get you there.
Well, we want to get
Luka Doncic.
That's why we would need to get our team to the finals, because he going to be gone if we don't get our team to the finals by next year.
Statistically speaking, he's the best player in the NBA. All the offense he creates, he's also among the top guards defensively, and he doesn't get any love for that. But you either love him or you hate him, and half the people love him, half the people hate him. The problem was what we talked about earlier. He doesn't have the characteristics of a leader. He's not fearless. He is whiny. I don't know. He's a fixture for the future. He is someone who can lead you possibly to an NBA title, but you need more mature people around him, because the more he stands around and whines and looks, the more everybody else does. Now he'll always fill up the stat sheet, but we've seen this year where he had an MVP season and we had a losing year and out of the playoffs. So he needs to grow up, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And by grow up, I mean just understand where he's at. I feel like the more he whines, the more the refs just take it out on us. And to me, of course, I'm a homer. It's obvious. He whines, we don't get the call. He whines more, we get less calls. The other team gets more calls. We lose the game. Then he does the exact same thing. And I remember there was a point in the mid-season where he was talked to about that, and he stopped whining, and I felt like the calls evened out slightly. And
I think I saw something where, but let me see. Team stats. I'm trying to see something here. So what this whole thing was, and you're going to be surprised by this, actually, we actually led the league in fouls drawn per game.
Nice.
On an average.
We
And
also
then
had the best half court offense in the league, but that's where this is still where we ended up.
but then at the same time, I mean, but at the same time, we were 23rd in fouls per game, which means we drew a lot. We drew a lot of fouls per game. I mean, that was. I mean, that was that. We committed a lot of fouls, but we drew a lot of fouls too.
Think
I
how
mean, that
many
was
it could have
something.
been if he wasn't whining. Think of how many times he got battered on his way to the basket and didn't get the call. But I mean, the more you whine, the more they just like fuck you then. And I think they penalize that. But moving on, next up is Josh Green. I think he's awesome. He's a streaky shooter. He misses way more than he hits, but he can create some offense, get to the basket. He's on a rookie-friendly contract, and he
His
hustles,
big
plays
thing is he's a
defense.
hustler.
Yeah, he gets steals. I think he's definitely a fixture on a team that could do better than what we did this year. He's a keeper. Got to keep him.
Yeah, and same with someone who I think is next on the list, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, Tim Hardaway is
Oh
next.
wait,
And I feel like he did what he was supposed to do this year. He's a
yeah,
shooter, doesn't play defense. I think everybody needs him on their team. They need
yeah,
somebody who can just come in and make offense and get hot.
a catch and shoot.
But it's at as far as defense goes, once again, it's completely non-existent.
Well, I
So
mean, again, he's a catch and shoot. I mean, but he's not even in that 3 and D kind of caliber.
not at all.
I mean, he goes in, he shoots the ball, which I guess fits the mold for this team. But I mean, I don't necessarily see a long future for him with this team.
He's getting paid a little more than you'd expect, and someone will pay him even more in the future when his contract runs out.
Yeah.
But like I say, he's on every team in the league. He starts for a lot of teams in the league. I don't think with his lack of defense, you go anywhere with
Him
him.
as a starter, absolutely not.
Yeah, Jaden Hardy.
That's the guy that I was talking about. Absolutely.
Exactly.
We were talking about this a couple months ago and said, if worst case scenario, you rebuild the team around Jaden Hardy. Now, okay, he had a huge issue with turnovers, but other than that, he was good.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's great going forward. I can see him be a starter, shot creator, getting a good contract out of it. I think he can be a starter on a championship level team. I think he's got that kind of offense. He hustles on defense. Yeah, he's a keeper. Justin Holiday, we're going to give those people.
We got to give him more minutes. Not much else to say. Moving on.
It's incomplete. NBA player, but not an NBA starter. Situationally can come off the bench. Kyrie Irving, awesome, absolutely awesome.
But he's going to leave. He's
already gone. But
yeah.
I mean, what I expected and what I got were two different things. What I expected was trouble and lack of effort and sitting out games. And what I got was 100% effort, completely effective, ball distributor, everything you ever heard about him that was good was on display this year. And none of what you heard was bad was on display this year. That being said, he skipped out on the post-game media of the last game. He skipped out of town without an exit interview. He's gone, period.
Yeah.
I think he'll take less money to go to the coast. I can't say I really blame him.
No, not for the season that we had.
Maxi Kleber, I think he is a fan favorite. I think he is exactly what he is. Every team needs him. He starts for no team. Streaky shooter. good defender, one of our better ones, but not one of the better ones in the league. He's
No.
definitely a keeper. Keep him on a friendly contract, and that's it. AJ Lawson, incomplete grade. We don't know. Yeah.
I don't know him. Moving on.
JaVale McGee, also incomplete. Now, the fact that he's 35.
We need to give him more minutes next year. That's all. Not much to say.
But he's not a fixture going forward. He's 35 years old, and he's going to hit the downside soon. But hell, he just had an entire season off where he did not play, and I feel like that was a shame. Marquise Morris, once again,
incomplete.
That's an incomplete. Yeah. So we're just going to give him an incomplete grade.
He barely played this year.
Yeah. Frank Nidolinka, he probably incomplete, but when he was out there, it seemed like he knew how to play. He's going to be on every team.
He could be on most teams. I just don't see him having a future with us.
Dwight Powell should be coming off the bench exclusively.
He should be coming off the bench, and honestly, a lot of Mavs fans want him gone.
Yeah.
I mean, he just hasn't really been showing the results.
And finally, we'll wrap it up with Christian Wood. Personally, I think he's a keeper. His plus minus was always on the negative, but we need scoring. I didn't think his defense was that bad. He averaged a steal and a block a game. But once again, he could probably do better. But he's gone as well. He's already moved out. He's given his farewell message to the Mavs. So now it's up to the front office to try to improve the roster. It's up to Jason Kidd to get his head out of his ass. And that's it.
And another thing that I might add, we were 23rd in the NBA this year with a 75.5% free throw shooting. If that was at 80%, we would be a top 4 seed in the West easily.
Correct.
If we were just 80%, and 80% is still mediocre.
Yeah.
It's still mediocre free throw shooting.
Yeah.
If we were just 80%, we would be prime example. When we lost to the Milwaukee Bucks, number 1 seed in the East, by 1 point, but we went 10 for 25 on free throws in that game.
Yeah.
So that's that.
So there's a lot of work to do between
terrible.
now and next year. And it's time for those guys to get to work if they want to put a product on the court that is worthy of watching. Last year was frustrating. The first time I can remember turning off or not turning on games just because you know how shitty it was going to be. It was predictable. You'd see a comfortable lead and it start to slip away.
No lead was comfortable. You can't be serious right now. No lead was comfortable with us.
You'd end up turning on an old rerun of Gunsmoke. You know what I mean? Because it's like, you know what's coming.
You would turn on Denver Broncos season highlights just to watch better game management.
Yes. So once again, farewell to this sucky season. I want to try not to remember it. Good luck to the front office and the coaching on improving the actual game, but Jason Kidd's got to get better.
It starts with firing Jason Kidd. It doesn't start with Jason Kidd improving. It starts with firing him.
I agree with that.
And also, he was so bad this year. I'm just going to say this personally.
Yeah.
I feel like it was so bad he shouldn't get recognized for his 2011 efforts. That's how bad it was.
I feel like they should.
I mean, it feels like he wasn't even. It feels like he negatively contributed from that title run over a decade ago with this season.
Yeah,
that's how bad it was.
And he lost all his street cred from last year.
True. Terrible season. Not much else to say about it.
No. I mean, So we'll sign off with that and wish those guys luck, and we'll be back with the baseball podcast.
Yes, we will return with the baseball podcast. Rangers are actually looking somewhat competent in void of the Mavs falling to complete shit. We will definitely have a podcast about that sometime in the near future. Until then, stay tuned and y'all have a nice day.
You too. Bye.